Hi, this is my week 3 FMP reflection video. This week, some of us in our theory lesson shared the research that we had done for our initial FMP research task. One of the presentations that we watched was Adam's, who discussed how recent political scandals in the UK have impacted the public's trust in the government. He discussed that it was found in a recent survey that only 35% of the UK's public have trust in the government. He also discussed how scandals such as Partygate and other scandals that the government has committed have really impacted the trust that the UK have in the government. He discussed that when the government has these kind of scandals exposed, it really affects how the public perceives them and affects their trust in them, as it leads to them having to give out these apologies that most often seem very insincere and lead to them making things up, such as with Partygate back in 2021. This issue is extremely relevant to our play, A Series of Public Apologies, as the government actually ends up getting involved and the Prime Minister ends up making a statement about the event that has happened. And it also is very relevant as this show is obviously about a series of apologies being made, and often they seem insincere and kind of just rambling on, which is related to what the government often does. I think that Adam's presentation will really help our play going forward, as we can look into actual scandals that the government has committed and the apologies that they have made about these, and we can look into the satire and the irony of the events that happened and play with this and really just look at all the different aspects of it and maybe make references to the actual events that have happened in real life. I think these kind of events also are really eye-opening for how much people in power really don't care about the situation that they're talking about or dealing with, and how it's just words that they're saying, and how they're just trying to create a good public image rather than actually trying to help the situation at all or caring about the people that are actually involved. So we can really look into this and look at character work and how this can be portrayed through each of the characters. A second presentation that we watched was Curtis's, who discussed protests and riots in the UK. He discussed the 2011 protest that happened after someone was shot by the police. He also discussed the Black Lives Matter protest that happened in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered at the hands of police brutality. And he also discussed the protest that happened after Sarah Everard was murdered and kidnapped by a police officer in 2021. After Curtis had discussed what happened in these protests and why they exactly happened, he discussed how we as actors can look at the emotions that these real life protesters had and how we can take these into our characters as we develop the riot scene that we have started to look at in our practical sessions. Curtis also discussed how after these protests happen, after a little while, people will stop talking about them and stop sharing them on social media, and they will move on to something new. This is very relevant to our play, as this is what happens near the end of the play when the fourth speaker is talking to an interviewer. They talk about how the media's moved on, and they say how only Piers Morgan is still tweeting about it, but nobody pays much attention to it. So it just shows how people only care about something for a short amount of time and then they'll find something else to move on to. As I mentioned before, this presentation is really helpful as we do have a riot scene in our play. But I think even though we want to play on the comedic side of it and the satire, it's also good to look at what actually happens in a real protest, which Curtis's presentation has helped enhance our knowledge of this and made us look into what really happens in a UK protest. A third presentation that we watched was Chloe's, who discussed why climate protesters are targeting art galleries. This presentation again obviously looked at protests, as this is a huge theme in our play. She discussed that climate change protesters want to leave a message when they commit these acts, such as throwing paint at the paintings in the art galleries. They believe that this will make the public angry and will make them want to make a change to what is happening around them, and as they feel that people are ignoring this and this is the only way to get their attention. Obviously what happens in our play is seen as an act of protest, as this is what the fourth speaker said that they were doing when they smeared the poo and the blood on the bathroom wall. The fourth speaker felt like this was one of their only options, as they felt that they weren't being listened to, which I feel like is definitely what climate change protesters are doing, as Chloe discussed in her presentation. I think that Chloe's presentation will help towards our play, as it gives us a real life example of something that is a bit less extreme than what happens in the play, but it's a similar kind of thing with them vandalising something, which in the case of what Chloe was talking about is obviously art galleries, but it relates to real life, and it can give us some understanding behind why the fourth speaker might have done what they did.